Today, we're looking at Noodler's General of the Army. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Noodler's General of the Army is a green ink, although it's got some interesting properties about it. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Retro 51 with Tornado with a broad nib to take my notes for this video. Now, before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. First up is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a lot of blue push very far up the page, a little bit of some green, and a tiny bit of this kind of highlighter yellow across the top. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and that blue looks very permanent across the bottom. It looks like almost none of it moved. In fact, the rest of the ink fled up the page, leaving only that yellow at the top, and there's this spot of green. Now that spot of green actually makes me think that there's no green in this ink. This is a yellow and blue ink. The blue being the more permanent part, the yellow not. And that one just took a little bit of it. So the first chromatography, that green, is just a mixing area of those two colors. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let my smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, this ink has no fear of being re-wet. None whatsoever. Use it to take notes. Use it to highlight. There is no problem. What's interesting is when we get to water. Water completely and reactivated pulled up the yellow, which, again, if we're thinking about the chromatography that there's only yellow and blue in this ink, the yellow is gone, which the second chromatography showed us would happen, leaving only the blue behind. And that looks really cool. That's a nice blue by itself. Pen flush did nothing the water didn't already do. Just the blue is left behind. It's only removing the yellow, which is a common theme here because bleach could not make that blue budge. This is a very permanent blue, a very washable yellow. So make sure that if you're using this in your pen, because I didn't have staining problems, however, I would still advise testing it in a more inexpensive pen for yourself before you put it into that Viscosity Medici. Just saying. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with a realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's General of the Army has a viscosity of 1.34, and man, that is a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's General of the Army has an average dry time of 11 seconds, making it a drier ink. It dries in line with certain fast dry inks that are marketed, and in fact I've noticed a lot of Noodler's inks that are more permanent tend to dry a bit quicker. Now let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading at all. 7 seconds to dry. The medium gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us we're not going to get a lot of color variation, and we didn't. The smear test, I don't think you could recover this if you smeared it. So Tomoe River. Tomoe River gives us no bleeding. It does give us ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Same exact tone with the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade, 13 seconds to dry. Same tone on the medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us we're not going to get any color variation. We didn't. The smear test says you likely can't recover it, and I'm going to believe that. Rhodia. The Rhodia gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Same tone of green with the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do get some light shading going on. The K is darker, the H in the is darker, the H and E in the other the is darker, the R and over is darker. So we get some light shading going on. 8 seconds to dry. The medium had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It did offer the same light shading that went on. The K is a little bit darker, where the P and the D touch darker. The H, E, and the is darker. So we do get some color variation here. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby, both of them show us little bits of color variation. The same color variation we saw on the writing sample, not tons, but some. The smear test says you could likely recover it. So I'm taking my notes with a Retro 51 broad nib, and the thing is, I'm getting bleed spots and tons of show through. Now it didn't touch the page underneath in any of the bleed, but I am getting bleed spots all over the place where it's seeping very deep into the paper, showing how aggressive this ink is. So while I like the tone of the ink, that does worry me because I use a lot of broads in my own life. So I tested this with different tone paper, the yellow Rhodia. The yellow Rhodia gave us no bleeding, no ghosting. What about any color change? There is no color change at all on this. At all. But the yellow tone paper is going to affect us in other ways. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and no shade. The exact same tone of green with the extra fine, with no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We lost the shading here. Compared to the white, we lost the shading. We no longer have it. It took 8 seconds to dry. The medium gave no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We got one spot that's a little bit darker. The K in quick looks a little bit darker right there, and that's it. 11 seconds to dry. The scrubby shows us really no color variation in both. The medium does show that tiny bit. We only got the one spot that's a little bit darker. So these represent what went on there. The smear test, you might be able to recover that. So I tested this on the gray toned Gilelo. It's a laid paper. It gave us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading. Now I did expect all of the shading to go away with this ink on this paper. The extra fine had no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 7 seconds to dry. But we only ever saw that shading a little bit with, on the white Rhodia. 7 seconds. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade, 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test, I don't think you'd be able to recover this. Now this is the most interesting. I was just messing around and I threw this. I got to put some white background for you here to really see it. I threw this on some tracing paper just for fun to see what happens, because I do use tracing paper in making art at times, so I have a bunch of it around. But look at that. It's beautiful. This is the only spot where this ink really is beautiful. Start as normal. We get no bleed. Of course we have ghosting. It's tracing paper. The 1.1 is no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And the shade is amazing because it's blue and green in the writing. Just wow. Really, wow. I wish I could get it to write like this on white paper. Wow. Amazing. Really, really, truly gorgeous. And I've never seen anything like this. The only spot I ever saw something like this was in its chemical tests where I did the swab. That's it. This is where I see it in the writing, and it is just wow. Blues to greens, all right there. Absolutely gorgeous. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Look at that beautiful shading, the blue to green. It is something else. I want to see if I can zoom in a little bit and maybe get you a little better look at it. Try and keep my hands out of the way. Just gorgeous. Starts with the blue in quick, turns to green, back to blue, blue to green with blue on top in the. Lazy stays mostly blue. Dog is blue with some green spots. Fox is blue with a green X. Just wow, gorgeous. 5 seconds to dry. The medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and that crazy shading going on again. Just crazy, and it's so gorgeous. That blue and green together, and blue and green don't normally really go together, but wow, this is spectacular. I want to see Nathan be able to come up with this on an ink that writes on white paper like that, because man, oh man, if I was to ever have an ink made, I want it to do this on white paper. I want it to do blue to green, blue writing with green shading, because this is standout gorgeous. 6 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for the extra fine and the medium is really interesting, because the scrubby gave us green, it gave us color variation. The smear test, you're not going to be able to recover it, but look at the smear. The smear's blue, the scrubby's green, just like we saw in the writing. Just wow, this right here, the colors I want if I was to ever make an ink. This is going to be it. That's all I have for the writing sample. Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's General of the Army, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now the green or the blue that could be left behind of this ink are not particularly screaming, and they're not so dark that it's a problem. So I wanted to put a dark brown. And I chose Noodler's number 41 brown because I felt it matched as a tone, but also in some of its properties. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Noodler's General of the Army? I think the colors are fantastic. The biggest problem I have is if you use it in a broad nib or a wet nib, it tends to bleed through the pages a lot. And that's a problem for me. Even though I don't write on the back of paper a lot of times, I want the option of being able to put something back there. This can show itself to be a very aggressive ink, which isn't always a problem if you have stuff that you know has to be permanent. All of that aside, the color that this ink gave on tracing paper was amazing. The blue to green in the shading, man, I want an ink that can do that regularly. It is amazing. I just wish this one wasn't so aggressive. I might try it in a drier, finer nib because I do like the color. Thanks for watching.